大好彩呢一世人，時時朋友關照，個個夠 friend 死黨幫我忙，齊齊同路共笑。世界惡撈分分鐘要捱，時時捱到想叫，索晒氣鬆一鬆透下閒，成班友講陣笑。有心笑一笑，快樂最重要，笑一笑真妙，要話笑又笑，笑就。
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Not Content Podcast. My name is Jerome Kusani. Here on tonight's episode, we are going to be discussing Jackie Chan, sort of, as he is in the movie Winners and Sinners from 1983. Please leave a 4 or 5 star review on Spotify or Apple to get those algorithms going. Please like and subscribe on YouTube. Click the bell icon for notifications. We are continuing our Jackie Chan month, but Brian, you have been dodging fire this weekend, and I don't mean that in a euphemistic way. You have literally been dodging fire. We were supposed to record this a few days earlier, but you nearly had to evacuate thanks to a fucking arsonist. Brian, how are you doing?
Okay, so if you look at it on a map, I live on Fallbrook and Roscoe. A mile up the road is the end of Roscoe that leads into Valley Circle. The fire was on Valley Circle. So being at the bottom of a hill, obviously the fire won't track as much. But in between that is like an orchard farm, which scares the shit out of me every time we have these fires nearby, especially when it's near Valley Circle, which has happened multiple times. So this is the closest it's ever gotten. Like, I think back in 2019, it got really, really close, and that was pretty scary. But this got even closer because some arsonists set it off right at the border. But luckily, there's a fire station right nearby, so they were able to get it and get it under control in under 2-3 hours. But from that time span, I was kind of like packing random shit, didn't know what to pack. I chose my trading cards over my PS5 if I had to make that choice, and I made that decision. So, but
probably a good decision on your part.
I mean, the insurance can cover the PS5. You know, those trading cards I made are one of a kind. So, but man, it was just crazy because it was this 2 to 3 hour span where we were just like all in our clothes, ready to go. We put the harness on our dog. Like the dog thought we were going to walk her the whole time, and I felt bad for that. But we were just kind of just ready to go if we had to. But man, luckily they got it under control really quick, and then overnight got it under containment. So, but that's just one fire. That was the Kenneth fire. There's the Palisades fire. There's another fire somewhere else. And right now, it's a bad idea to even go through the Topanga Canyon. If you've ever heard of that, you know, in the old 60s songs, 70s songs, you've heard stories about it in Hollywood. Topanga Canyon is not going to be the same because a lot of businesses are gone. So that sucks. And I used to get really like dizzy going down those roads because it's a really wavy road through Topanga Canyon. But man, it's never going to be the same again. So that's kind of where I'm at in terms of that. But luckily, we're all safe here. We almost had to go, but you know, logically, I think, you know, if the fire were to come to my house, it would have been just super, super windy. But luckily that day it wasn't. So the flames were able to be controlled and contained really quick. So. But on the other hand, we did watch this movie, and Winners and Sinners I've actually seen multiple times. I've seen it in English and Mandarin. So it's just like, man, I mean, this movie's bad, but it's fun to watch in certain parts. So I skip parts of it sometimes, even though I just watched this movie recently last year and then again now. But I got to say that Sammo Hung definitely is a great action director. Maybe kind of good on the comedy, but he should not be writing scripts at all because this is a terribly written script.
This is a movie that's 1 hour and 48 minutes, and it feels like it's 3 hours.
Yeah, and there's a lot of unnecessary scenes, too, that we'll get into, but to kind of get a background of these characters and why I chose this, and Jackie Chan is actually in this movie, but Jackie Chan actually went to opera school as a child, right? He actually went to school with Sammo Hung and fellow actor Yoon Biao, who's a cameo role in this. He was the other CID agent with the girlfriend. But they were usually in movies together, those three, because they grew up together. Like, you know, they just kind of just grew up in the same school, became best friends, and that's why they work with each other. So this idea of this Lucky Stars, right? He wanted like an ensemble troupe kind of thing, almost like the Rat Pack in the 80s, right? With that same kind of group of kids. Let's put them in different movies. In this case, they kind of made them like the same character types for each movie. Sometimes some of the actors kind of switch the roles. Sometimes some of the actors kind of bail out and miss the movie and whatnot. But this is kind of like the original first movie that has those Lucky Stars concept. So This is the first of a trilogy with Jackie Chan. The rest of the movies after that don't have Jackie Chan, so this is formerly known as the Lucky Stars trilogy. Winners and Sinners is the first one. My Lucky Stars is the second one, which I watched, but that's not nearly as good, considering this is like a weak script anyway. And then Twinkle Twinkle Lucky Stars. But I think the whole concept is like this idea of wacky comedy mixed with action, uh, but they don't get the drama down at all. But it's all about the comedy and the action. So they try really hard, but then there's just too many inconsistencies. And I think Sammo Hung just doesn't know how to write a coherent script, even though Barry Wong is also credited as the screenwriter. I don't know. It just feels like all the stuff with Jackie Chan was shoehorned in, because if you take Jackie Chan out, it affects the plot. It doesn't affect the plot at all, actually, because he's a cop, while the other group is kind of like the misfits that get caught in prison, almost like an Ocean's 11 type thing. They all come together. But, man, I just think Sammo Hung builds up to these great climaxes, but he doesn't know how to get there.
I like the Jackie Chan chase scene. There's this scene where he's once again on skates, and I thought that was good. But you could completely remove that from this movie, and it would not affect the plot at all. And I'm not necessarily against the idea of having a movie without a plot, but there has to be some consistency, and that's the issue with this movie, is that from one scene to the next, you don't know what you're getting. You're getting an action scene, you're getting some very broad comedy. I think the comedy in this movie is pretty bad, and I think that's why this movie just feels excruciating. And I like we've definitely watched Sammo Hung in other things that I've enjoyed him in, but this definitely this was not it, and it's unfortunate because I know that the movie we watched last week was not perfect, but I enjoyed it. So my hope is that the next two movies that we watch for this very special Jackie Chan January, I hope that I enjoy those more than I did here. I think the trick with this movie is that it needed a clearer vision in terms of, like, do they want to go for this like Ocean's 11 vibe, or do they want to stick with the comedy? Do they want to stick with the action? And I think it's a complicated question, because it seems like they just, it seems like Sammo Hung just wanted to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And I think the issue is that nothing stuck. So my experience was, I started watching this movie on Peacock, and it was in English, and I couldn't do it. Like, it felt like a mockery of the movie. So I found a version on YouTube that was in the original language. I believe Cantonese. Is that it? Cantonese?
I think so. It might have been, yeah, maybe not Mandarin. I think it was Cantonese, actually.
Because if we're talking Hong Kong, we're talking
Hong Kong.
Cantonese.
Yeah.
Mandarin is mainland and Taiwan. So I watched it in the original language. The language I believe it is intended to be heard in with subtitles, and it only slightly improved the experience. I would not have been.
That's why I said I watched it both in English and the original, and it still is like, it doesn't change you. Like, usually when there's a bad dub,
right?
You know what I'm saying? You just like, oh my god. But in this case, it didn't affect either way. So
no, it still felt very broad. And I mean, I understand if audiences like this. I know that in terms of humor, when you go to Hong Kong or mainland China, like, their sensibilities tend to be very broad, and you're not going to get the sophisticated level of comedy that you might get in England or the United States with wordplay and things of that nature. You're just not going to get that with these comedies. But this movie, I don't know. Like, I'm really trying to think of, like, how did I feel about individual scenes, individual characters, and it's really tough for me to say, because I didn't feel a whole lot. I mean, like, the invisible scene is probably, that has to be the most famous, and I don't necessarily mind it. I think it's an interesting idea, but it just becomes misogynistic, and I was like, well, there goes that. It's like any potential enjoyment I could have gotten out of this has now just is gone, because he's like trying to stare at her tits, and it's just gross.
yeah, so that was essentially like a Kids in the Hall type skit that was just thrown in that has nothing to do with the actual plot of the movie, and it goes on for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes maybe. But man, it's just so unnecessary.
It goes on for a very long time.
And it goes on and on and on, and then it's almost like the joke dies, and then it kind of recovers, but then the joke just dies a double death. So it's just, wow, like, they were, like you said, he was really throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. But I think In terms of the action, yeah, fantastic stuff. Go seek those out on YouTube, those clips. The middle part where they got that random meet up with Jackie Chan. Like, Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung don't even know each other until they meet up in the middle of the movie in a fucking hold up at a restaurant or a fast food joint. So that action sequence is really good, obviously, because it's them kicking ass. There's some fun comedy there too. I think that joke about "don't shoot or I'll shoot you all with one bullet," and they all had like their heads in a row. I thought that was like a good visual sight gag. But other than that, it has nothing to do with the overall plot of the movie. Like, that gang, nothing to do with the movie at all. And so the actual plot is that these 5 random people get arrested. They meet up in jail, and we don't even see them become friends in jail. They just, by like 2 seconds, they're out of jail. We don't even know how long they've been in there. And they're all of a sudden friends, and they give up their lives to stick with each other. Just like weird kind of concept. And then they get out of jail. One of them has a sister, so they stay at the sister's house, and then they start their cleaning service. And then during the cleaning service, they find this briefcase in this gangster's house. They accidentally take it with them, and all kind of shenanigans go awry. And then there's 2 rival gangs fighting for this briefcase, which is the MacGuffin. And what's inside the MacGuffin? It's 3 plates that are counterfeit bill maker plates. So there you go. There's the plot. There's the MacGuffin, and it all ties into this big kind of fight at the end, which I thought was really well done. Like, there was some really well thought out action stunts at the end of the film. In terms of like the numbers, because you always got to remember it's always going to be a bunch of guys against either 2 or 3 people, maybe mostly just one most of the time. In this case, it was just 3 people, but they choreographed it so well. Sammo Hung was a star of it. But at the same time, they did these things where I was just thinking, like, man, all these jokes about Orange Cassidy and his psychology, right? And what does that one actor do, Jerome, to fucking psychologically out-psych out the dude and then smack him in the face?
You tell me. I'm not remembering this right now.
Wow, so it's the Orange Cassidy gimmick where the guy goes up to him and then kind of punches him softly, does a dance, kicks him softly, like pretends like...
I did not make that connection at all. Maybe that makes me a bad person.
I don't know. I mean, we've always had this argument about Orange Cassidy not having proper wrestling psychology, and he's ruining wrestling and blah, blah, blah. And then they showed it.
Not for me. Orange Cassidy rules. So I'm not. Yeah, I'm certainly not the one making that argument.
I love his psychology, and it works in this movie because he catches the guy off guard and knocks him out. So it does work. And I know this is an action movie.
I think action comedy. I think the action comedy is generally fine. I think the problem is the other comedy. Like, I think the thing I complimented the movie last week was that Jackie Chan I thought was really funny, and the comedy connected to what was happening in the action. And this movie, I think it just needed more of that. Like the action should have been focused on the action and comedy should have been intertwined. And I think I would have liked this movie a lot more. And also it should have been like 85 to 90 minutes.
Yeah, for sure. This is an hour and 48-minute movie, and it was just way too long. And then there's this other stunt I want to talk about where we get this complaint in wrestling where everyone is just standing outside, and then someone jumps up the top, and they're just standing there, but then he lands on all of them. This exact spot happens in this movie, too. It's by the same guy, Richard Nigg, who also did the spot with the Orange Cassidy gimmick. So I'm just thinking to myself, man, if Jim Cornette ever watches this movie, he'll be so pissed off at this guy for killing the business in terms of action choreography. Because, like, he does the 2 things that he hates. And, yeah, I mean, I was just, blown away that it's 1983 and we're doing the gimmick of someone jumping on a bunch of dudes from like the next, from a ladder or something. And it looks like they're standing there waiting to catch him, but it's part of the action and it's part of the fun. So there you go. I think people say it doesn't work in action movies. It happens right here and it works. So that was really cool. And in terms of Jackie Chan, he's just the cop that kind of knows these people by chance and then gets an award at the end.
Like, it's weird that he does it, like, they're not antagonistic towards each other. And that's that's another issue, I think, is that it's like he's a cop, they're criminals, but there's like no real connection between them.
Right, and he's the star. He gets the top billing in this movie. So I kept thinking, like, is this kind of like the Ben Affleck thing, the payback picture? And what's a payback picture?
You're like a child. What do I keep telling you? You got to do the safe picture, then you do the art picture. And then sometimes you got to do the payback picture because your friend says you owe him.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen, the payback picture, as told by Ben Affleck, because he was in Jay and Bob for like 10 minutes at most, and I would say Jackie Chan is in this movie 15 minutes at most, and that's just doing the action stuff and the roller skating stuff. Like, he's not even in the final fighting sequence at the end that I was talking about. He's not even one of the stars in that final fight sequence.
It's really, really bizarre.
It's just so bizarre, and it's just like, I don't know. And he gets top billing. It almost feels like, Anthony Hopkins taking the top billing in Silence of the Lambs, even though he's really the supporting character.
I mean, Jackie Chan is clearly the star, the bigger star, so you put his name at the top, and that's how you draw people in. But it's a very tricky thing. Like, I would love to know what critics were saying, but there really isn't a lot of that because this movie doesn't really have a huge
The only
following.
thing we really have to go on is these YouTube comments on the YouTube page for the American version.
Which I don't personally care about that. Like, I want to see what
I'm
people
just blown away that how many people saw it when they were younger. I guess they, probably either rented it or from Hong Kong or whatever. But this has like a fan following, I guess, if you want to call it that. But which is why maybe it's also on like Amazon Prime and Peacock and Tubi. It's like it's on all the streaming services, YouTube included. And it feels like it's one of those like movies that you can kind of throw in. It's like, oh, Jackie Chan, and that's kind of what happened to me when I first discovered this movie last year. So I can kind of say I was one of those people that kind of got, I read about it and I was like, this seems intriguing. And then I go jump into it and it's just totally something that I wasn't expecting. But at the same time, I get to see Sammo Hung do his thing. And that's basically kind of what, when a Sammo Hung movie, going into it, I just feel like, okay, kind of going for the action sequences. If he's writing the movie at this point, I don't know. But I do think he is a better director because there's another movie called Eastern Condors that I haven't watched yet that supposedly is really like, his version of Rambo, but the script is really good because he didn't write it. But he's the star of it, and there's like no comedy. It's really like a straight-up action movie, him playing a Rambo type character.
That would probably be something I would enjoy a lot more than this.
I think so too. Yeah, because he's not writing it, and he's not doing goofy comedy. So Sammo Hung is kind of like a mixed bag, I guess. I mean, we love him when he's choreographing Ip Man movies, right? And then he was kind of the star of the second one.
That's why when I saw him, he was in this movie. It was like, because you and I, when we decide to watch these movies, we both kind of have to agree to them. And I looked at the fact that Sammo Hung was this, and remember when we were talking about Ip Man and how much we enjoyed those. And I was like, okay, this could be good. And then I was watching this, I was like, nope.
Yeah, that's kind of like it's a mixed bag for me because I do like going back and watching some of the sequences. Like, there's this one random sequence that has nothing to do with the plot again, but they're just kind of in this not a carnival, but like a food, like farmers market type place. And there's this random band performing, and they sing "Young Turks" by Rod Stewart, which is like the best Rod Stewart song.
I did remember this.
And then it's got nothing to do with anything, and it's just like such a fun 90 seconds. So I was just like, okay, I'm down. Like, I love this song. So, but it's like a cover version, and I guess they did it illegally because it's some of the Prince. They had to cut it out, which is fine because it, again, has nothing to do with the plot anyway. But just random types of comedy being thrown at the wall, and that was one of them. And I was just like, okay, karaoke type comedy, I'm down for it. And I don't know if you noticed too, but for some reason when they're singing that song, those three people, they all have their eyes closed. So I was just like, what the heck is going on here? So again, it's just this random comedy.
Are they going for a vibe, or is that something?
I don't know. Like, it's just so weird that they're all have their eyes closed performing. So again, just weird stuff all over this movie. Like, I would recommend watching this movie.
There's got to be a reason. Like, there has to be a reason. There has to be something culturally that we're missing. I'm always willing to plead ignorance as opposed to blaming them for doing something wrong because there can be that disconnect.
Yeah, because I've never seen anyone perform a song with their eyes closed like that. It was very unique, but again, it's just kind of
maybe they're trying to do an impersonation of Rod Stewart, who maybe like he does close his eyes when he sings that song. I don't know,
but listen. If you've never heard Young Turks before, believe me, you've heard the beat, and I would say that.
I recognized it immediately, and I was like, "This is incredible."
Yeah. And I would say that The Weeknd kind of ripped it off for Blinding Lights, but I do love the song Blinding Lights anyway. But I hope Rod Stewart got a check from that. But yeah, I would say this is like a 5 out of 10 for me. Like, I would say Battle Creek Brawl is better because Jackie Chan takes over that movie. In this case, it's just kind of like random stuff happening with a group of people. But I do like the beginning as well, though, because when you introduce these characters, it has these funny setups, so that was kind of fun. But one of the people was actually undercover cop. Spoiler alert. So I was thinking, like, why didn't we see this guy get arrested? And then obviously there's a reason why the guy didn't get arrested, because he was a cop the whole time. So that was the big twist, and that was actually a twist. I didn't see it coming.
It's a 4 out of 10 for me. This is not an enjoyable experience, and I think that there's a couple scenes that I enjoyed, but that's pretty much it. This is kind of a miss, but here's hoping next week is better.
Yes, next week is Project A, and this actually doesn't have the Lucky Stars troupe. It seems more like action oriented. This is the famous one where Jackie Chan falls from like canopy to canopy, like 3 stories or something, and then lands on his head. And he does this, like, he breaks his neck essentially, is what he tells us in this interview that I watched. But it was just incredible because he basically compresses his spine, and he had to miss. I guess he had to go back to work the next day or something. So just a crazy stunt that's on camera, legendary. Sammo Hung is in it, but he's not directing it, or does he direct it?
Yeah,
no, Jackie Chan directs it.
Jackie Chan is the director. I'm sure that Sammo Hung had something to do with it, but yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I'm sure it's going to be better.
And the reason I say I think this is going to be better, not just because of the word of mouth and kind of the reviews I've read, but also because it's the one that's not streaming for free. If you get that, you know what I'm saying? Out of all the Jackie Chan movies, winners and sinners is all over the place, but this one is hard to find, so we're going to have to go on. I might pay the $3, I don't know, but I also like to go on the archive, maybe. You never know. The Internet Archive, if it's still alive by the time this comes out, but you never know. But yes, I think it'll get better. I just wanted to kind of show this as because a lot of people talk about this Lucky Stars group of actors that I've heard of, and I wanted to kind of look into it. And this was the first movie, and of course this was all over streaming, so it was a fun watch. But just don't watch it complete the second time around, and kind of just, if you want to relive some of the moments, go on YouTube, and that's about it.
I would agree with that. But yeah, next week I'm sure I'm feeling more confident about it because it's got a couple nominations, it's got some good reviews, so I will look forward to that. Definitely check out Ben Phillips and I. This week we did our top 10 movies of 2024. Over 2 hours talking about our top 10. Also going over some of our disappointments from the year, some of our highlights. But yes, a lot to listen to on our From the Q Podcasting Network. Very much looking forward to getting into the rest of the year. Ben and I will be discussing Pixar at some point. We have some special plans for February, March, and April. So we've got that to look forward to.
For sure. So that kind of wraps up week 2 of January with Jackie. And I promise next week will be better based on the reviews. And it's going to be a first-time watch for me, Project Day, as well as Jerome. So it's going to be an interesting talk. So thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.